Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are on day 4 of the 12 days of Stitchmas. I'm doing one a day for 12 days. I have them all in a playlist. So if you don't want to see what's in here, then just save the playlist for once you've had yours open. But I am going to open the window for the day and then I'm going to create a project with it. These crafty advent calendars are such a good way to just take a moment and slow down and get a little bit of creative and crafty time in the holidays. I love the fact that they're fairly simple. They're not complicated ones to stitch, as well as the fact that you can choose whether to stitch them or not. So far in all of the dies that we've opened so far, they're all ones that you could opt to do without the stitching if you didn't want to do that. And I love the fact that there is that option. And here we have a Santa. There's that Santa hat die that I mentioned would be really cool on top of that ornament. So you could easily just create the Santa hat and add it to that ornament. I think it would be absolutely adorable. So I die cut all of my pieces off screen. I have just white cardstock, poppy field for the red, pink sand for the rosy cheeks, and then I used Barely Peach cardstock for the Santa face. Now after I put the white trim and little pom-pom on the Santa hat, I decided I wanted it in glitter cardstock instead. So I quickly die cut a piece of that and it just adds a fun sparkle to it. I set that aside to dry and now I'm going to start assembling the snowman's face. I'm only doing partial assembly here. The rest of it can be assembled after the stitching is done, but some of it can be done now and we might as well let that sit and let that dry while we are doing the stitching. So I added the cheeks to it. The Santa eyes are open spaces, so I'm just going to put a piece of black cardstock behind there so they are black. You could also take that die and die cut it again with black cardstock and insert it, but it's so much easier to just glue a piece onto the back. For the beard, I'm using the white thread that came in the add-on kit. You could, if you had shimmery thread, I think it would be fun to use that as well, or even a silver thread would be fun, but there was no shimmery thread or silver thread in the add-on kit, and I want to stick to the threads that are there, so I'm going to use the white. So the stitching, once again, is fairly simple. This one is a little bit challenging to hold onto at the beginning because there's just such a small piece of cardstock there. I want to get my stitches nice and taut. I want to make sure they're nice and flat and not some excess thread there, and I also don't want them so tight that I'm curling the cardstock. So I'm using my left hand to hold where that string is or that thread is on the pieces that I've already stitched. I'm also using my pinky and my ring finger to kind of hold the loose thread out of my way when I'm putting my needle in the next hole. It just keeps it from knotting quite as much. This particular thread I found really wanted to knot if I didn't do that. So by doing that, I can just make my life a little bit easier. It also kept wanting to loop around some of the excess cardstock. So for the most part, I kept it out of that as well. So once I have that completely done, I'm going to take a tiny piece of Barely Art tape and I'm going to tape that thread down and then I'm going to snip off the end. And I did do that exact same thing when I started. I put my thread through the first hole and then just taped it to the back to make sure that it was nice and secure. I also die cut just a solid piece for that beard. So I'm going to glue this onto there and I'm using some Barely Art glue. It's a nice liquid glue and it gives me some time to shimmy things in place, make sure it's exactly where I want it to be before the glue starts to set. I'm using some reverse tweezers here to hold those pieces in place while they are drying. While I was stitching the beard for the first part, I thought it would look nice to do that hoe die set from from day 3. Just doing the hoe with the stitching, and instead of doing the ornament, doing the Santa's face instead. So I die cut the shadow out of white, I die cut the H out of red, and I'm using the same white floss that I used for Santa's beard. You could also use the gold floss like I did with the last video, but I just wanted to keep it different from that, and by having just the red and the white in the Santa for this particular one, just a little bit of a different color scheme. Neither one is right or wrong, just something fun. And if you happen to have silver floss or like a sparkly floss that you used with the beard, that would be fun to use for this as well. So after doing the straight line for the H, I'm just going to go on the back and just kind of loop that thread underneath the stitches that are already there, just to make sure that it's nice and secure, that I don't have any thread poking out, and it just keeps it under control. So once again, it really wants to loop around those extra pieces, and because we've got a little bit of an almost scripty H here, there is some tails for it to loop around. It's fairly easy to fix, but it does get annoying every once in a while. If by chance your thread starts to twist and really want to knot, you can take it and you can hold your stitched piece up, let the thread and needle dangle down, and it will just spin and untwist itself. So if you're having that issue, it's a super simple solution to it, and it makes your life easier once you've untwisted it. This particular stitching die is very easy to do. I just go up one hole, down the next one, and then skip one, go up, and then go back in order to create the look of a continuous line. But you could also do a running stitch if you wanted. Go up one, down the next, up the next, down, and then it looks like it's kind of skipping. It's not a solid stitching line. You get more of a, well, it's a running stitch. So you have some options here if you wanted to do that. I like the look of the solid stitched line through here, so I kept it the same as the last video, but just know that you can change it up if you want. Once I have this last little bit of stitching done, I'm going to do the same as before and take a tiny piece of the Best Ever Craft tape, tape that thread to the back, and then snip off any excess tape as well as the end of the thread. Then I'm going to glue this stitched H to my shadow piece. I'm going to use that same Barely Art glue and use the reverse tweezers to hold them in place. Because this H is a little bit bigger, it's harder to hold in place just with the two pairs of tweezers that I have. So I am off screen just going to hold these pieces in place to make sure that they sit nice and flat. For my background, I wanted to do a different background from yesterday's card, so I'm using the Sparkling Snow embossing folder. It's also a Spellbinders embossing folder, and it's just going to create some fun texture in the back. Because the Santa has a nice wintry hat on, I thought the snowy background worked perfectly. It also works perfect with this color scheme. While my background is drying, because I like to mist my cardstock before running them through an embossing folder, so I do need to wait for that to completely dry, I can assemble my Santa. So I started with assembling my hat and then realized I should put the beard on first, so I took it off. Another bonus of using liquid glue is you have that little bit of mistake fixing time. So it was easy just to pull that right off, glue the beard on, and then glue my hat on. When I did the die cutting for the glitter pieces for the Santa hat, it also has the mustache on that same die. So I ended up having a glitter mustache. And at first, I didn't think I was going to use it, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I tucked it to the side. But once I had it glued, putting the mustache on there, I didn't really like it in glitter for this particular project, so I just did it with the plain white cardstock. With the pink pieces of cardstock for the cheeks, there was also a piece for the nose as well as his mouth, so that just gets tucked underneath the mustache as well as on top of there. Once my background is completely dry, I can glue it to my card base, and I chose the Poppy Field to create the card base because I wanted to tie in the red from the H from the hoe as well as the Santa face. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a horizontal or vertical card, so it's nice to be able to just lay them on there and see which looks better. I ended up choosing a horizontal card. I figured there was a little bit more space here, so figured out my spacing, then use that same Barely Art glue to glue everything down. And I like to use an acrylic block just to put it on top, keeps everything nice and flat, holds it down, and frees up my hands to work on other things. Once that is completely dry, we have our finished card. Nice and simple, but a cute little holiday card, and it came together really, really quickly, but a fun one to give. This would also make a great ornament or even just a great little gift tag. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time you spend with me. I will see you tomorrow for day 5.